B-29s staging THRUF bases around Chengdu in China to make a series of raids on strategic targets in Japan. 23. This effort failed to achieve the strategic objectives that its planners had intended, largely because of logistical problems, the bombers' mechanical difficulties, the vulnerability of Chinese staging bases, and the extreme range required to reach key Japanese cities. 24. Brigadier General Hayward S. Hansel determined that Guam, Tinian, and Saipan in the Mariana Islands would better serve as B-29 bases, but they were in Japanese hands. 25. Strategies were shifted to accommodate the air war. 26. And the islands were captured between June and August 1944. Air bases were developed. 27. And B-29 operations commenced from the Marianas in October 1944. 28. The XXI Bomber Command began missions against Japan on the 18th of November 1944. 29. The early attempts to bomb Japan from the Marianas proved just as ineffective as the China-based B-29s had been. Hansel continued the practice of conducting so-called high-altitude precision bombing, aimed at key industries and transportation networks, even after these tactics had not produced acceptable results. 30. These efforts proved unsuccessful due to logistical difficulties with the remote location, technical problems with the new and advanced aircraft, unfavorable weather conditions, and enemy action. 31. 32. A vast devastated area with only a few burned out buildings standing. The Operation Meeting House firebombing of Tokyo on the night of 9–10 of March 1945 was the single deadliest air raid in history. 33. With a greater area of fire damage and loss of life than either of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima or Nagasaki. 34. 35. Hansel's successor, Major General Curtis LeMay, assumed command in January 1945 and initially continued to use the same precision bombing tactics, with equally unsatisfactory results. The attacks initially targeted key industrial facilities, but much of the Japanese manufacturing process was carried out in small workshops and private homes. 36. Under pressure from United States Army Air Forces, USAF, headquarters in Washington, LeMay changed tactics and decided that low-level incendiary raids against Japanese cities were the only way to destroy the production capabilities, shifting from precision bombing to area bombardment with incendiaries. 37. Like most strategic bombing during World War II, the aim of the air offensive against Japan was to destroy the enemy's war industries, kill or disable civilian employees of these industries, and undermine civilian morale. 38. 39. Over the next 6 months, the XXI Bomber Command under LeMay firebombed 64 Japanese cities. 40. The firebombing of Tokyo, codenamed Operation Meeting House, on 9–10 of March killed an estimated 100,000 people and destroyed 41 square kilometers, 16 square mi, of the city and 267,000 buildings in a single night. It was deadliest bombing raid of the war, at a cost of 20 B-29s shot down by flak and fighters. 41. By May, 75% of bombs dropped were incendiaries designed to burn down Japan's paper cities. By mid-June, Japan's 6 largest cities had been devastated. 42. The end of the fighting on Okinawa that month provided airfields even closer to the Japanese mainland, allowing the bombing campaign to be further escalated. Aircraft flying from Allied aircraft carriers and the Ryukyu Islands also regularly struck targets in Japan during 1945 in preparation for Operation Downfall. 43. Firebombing switched to smaller cities, with populations ranging from 60,000 to 350,000. According to Yuki Tanaka, the U.S. firebombed over 100 Japanese towns and cities. 44. The Japanese military was unable to stop the Allied attacks and the country's civil defense preparations proved inadequate. Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft guns had difficulty engaging bombers flying at high altitude. 45. From April 1945, the Japanese interceptors also had to face American fighter escorts based on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. 46. That month, the Imperial Japanese Army Air Service and Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service stopped attempting to intercept the air raids to preserve fighter aircraft to counter the expected invasion. 47. By mid-1945 the Japanese only occasionally scrambled aircraft to intercept individual B-29s conducting reconnaissance sorties over the country, to conserve supplies of fuel. 48. In July 1945, the Japanese had 137,800,000 liters, 1,156,000 USBBL, of avgas stockpiled for the invasion of Japan. About 72 million liters, 604,000 USBBL, had been consumed in the home islands area in April, May and June 1945. 49. While the Japanese military decided to resume attacks on Allied bombers from late June. By this time there were too few operational fighters available for this change of tactics to hinder the Allied air raids. 50. Atomic bomb development. Leslie Groves, Manhattan Project's director, with a map of Japan. The discovery of nuclear fission in 1938 made the development of an atomic bomb a theoretical possibility. 51. Fears that a German atomic bomb project would develop atomic weapons first, especially among scientists who were refugees from Nazi Germany and other fascist countries, were expressed in the Einstein-Szilard letter to Roosevelt in 1939. This prompted preliminary research in the United States in late 1939. 52. Progress was slow until the arrival of the British Maud Committee report in late 1941, which indicated that only 5 to 10 kilograms of isotopically pure uranium-235 were needed for a bomb instead of tons of natural uranium and a neutron moderator like heavy water. 53. Consequently, the work was accelerated, first as a pilot program, and finally in the agreement by Roosevelt to turn the work over the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to construct the production facilities necessary to produce uranium-235 and plutonium-239. This work was consolidated within the newly created Manhattan Engineer District, which became better known as the Manhattan Project, eventually under the direction of Major General Leslie R. Groves, Jr. 54. The work of the Manhattan Project took place at dozens of sites across the United States, and even some outside of its borders. It would ultimately cost over $2 billion, equivalent to about $26 billion in 2022. 55. And employ over 125,000 people simultaneously at its peak. Groves appointed J. Robert Oppenheimer to organize and head the project's Los Alamos laboratory in New Mexico, where bomb design work was carried out. 56. Two different types of bombs were eventually developed, a gun-type fission weapon that used uranium-235, called Little Boy, and a more complex implosion-type nuclear weapon that used plutonium-239, called Fat Man. 57. There was a Japanese nuclear weapon program, but it lacked the human, mineral, and financial resources of the Manhattan Project, and never made much progress towards developing an atomic bomb. 58. Preparations, organization and training. 3 men in military fatigues, without jackets or ties. The tiny and joint chiefs, Captain William S. Parsons, left, Rear Admiral William R. Purnell, center, and Brigadier General Thomas F. Farrell, right. The 509th Composite Group was constituted on the 9th of December 1944 and activated on the 17th of December 1944 at Wendover Army Airfield, Utah, commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets. 59. Tibbets was assigned to organize and command a combat group to develop the means of delivering an atomic weapon against targets in Germania, Japan. Because the flying squadrons of the group consisted of both bomber and transport aircraft, the group was designated as a composite rather than a bombardment unit. 60. Due to its remoteness, Tibbets selected Wendover for his training base over Great Bend, Kansas and Mountain Home, Idaho. 61. Each bombardier completed at least 50 practice drops of inert or conventional explosive pumpkin bombs, targeting islands around Tinian and later the Japanese home islands, until as late as August 14, 1945. 62. 63. Some of the missions over Japan were flown by Zing unescorted bombers with a single payload in order to custom the Japanese to this pattern. They also simulated actual atomic bombing runs, including the directions of ingress and egress with respect to the wind. Tibbets himself was barred from flying most missions over Japan for fear that he might be captured and forced to reveal what he knew. 63. On 5 April 1945, the code name Operation Centerboard was assigned. The officer responsible for its allocation in the War Department's Operations Division was not cleared to know any details of it. The first bombing was later codenamed Operation Centerboard I, and the second, Operation Centerboard II. 64. The 509th Composite Group had an authorized strength of 225 officers and 1,542 enlisted men, almost all of whom eventually deployed to Tinian. In addition to its authorized strength, the 509th had attached to it in Tinian 51 civilian and military personnel from Project Alberta, 65. Known as the 1st Technical Detachment. 66. The 509th Composite Group's 393D Bombardment Squadron was equipped with 15 Silver Plate B-29s. These aircraft were specially adapted to carry nuclear weapons, and were equipped with fuel-injected engines, Curtiss electric reversible pitch propellers, pneumatic actuators for rapid opening and closing of bomb bay doors and other improvements. 67. The ground support echelon of the 509th Composite Group moved by rail on the 26th of April, 1945, to its port of embarkation at Seattle, Washington. On the 6th of May the support elements sailed on the SS Cape Victory for the Marianas, while group material was shipped on the SS Emil Berliner. The Cape Victory made brief port calls at Honolulu and Inuiatak, but the passengers were not permitted to leave the dock area. An advance separate of the air echelon, consisting of 29 officers and 61 enlisted men, flew by C-54 to Northfield on Tinian, between 15 and 22 May. 68. There were also 2 representatives from Washington, D.C., Brigadier General Thomas Farrell, the Deputy Commander of the Manhattan Project, and Rear Admiral William R. Purnell of the Military Policy Committee, 69, who were on hand to decide higher policy matters on Thespit. Along with Captain William S. Parsons, the commander of Project Alberta, they became known as the Tinian Joint Chiefs. 70. Choice of targets. Map of Japan and the Marianas Islands indicating the routes taken by the raids. One goes straight to Iwo Jima and Hiroshima and back the same way. The other goes to the southern tip of Japan, up to Kokyura, down to Nagasaki, and the southwest to Okinawa before heading back to Tinian. The mission runs of the 6th and the 9th of August, with Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Kokyura, the original target for the 9th of August, displayed in April 1945, Marshall asked Groves to nominate specific targets for bombing for final approval by himself and Stimson. Groves formed a target committee, chaired by himself, that included Farrell Major John Adair, Colonel William P. Fisher, Joyce C. Stearns and David M. Dennison from the USAF, and scientists John von Neumann, Robert R. Wilson and William Penny from the Manhattan Project. The Target Committee met in Washington on the 27th of April, at Los Alamos on the 10th of May, where it was able to talk to scientists and technicians there, and finally in Washington on the